Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
What about now? Wow. So I had that introduction and nobody heard it. Wow. Awesome. Well, just real quick. We're watching the Middle East. They have us watching the Middle East, and President Trump and the military just made a brilliant move that could have us in control of 40% or more of global trade. And you're not hearing about that pretty much anywhere, at least not in the volume that it should be. And that is kind of a pattern that we've talked about here quite a bit, where the story that you're told and what's actually unfolding underneath are two completely different things. So whether it's global trade, school safety, what you're allowed to record in public spaces, what you're allowed to say online, all of that is under threat. And so we're going to get into that. So with that, welcome to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where faith in God is the standard and masculinity is not up for negotiation. Today is Thursday, April 16th in the year of our Lord 2026. And we have a ton to get into. I don't know if I'm going to get to all of it, honestly. We have follow-ups to the Swalwell deal. We have just crime that is exploding. We have what's going on in the Middle East. We have President Trump and his feud with the Pope and this ridiculous image that everyone is all up in arms about. We got a ton of stuff to get into and not a whole lot of time. So let's get after it. Before we get into all of that, though, I had my show all planned out, and then some things happened that I really want to address. And one of them has to do with immigration and the chaos that has ensued as a result of the previous administrations just throwing the gates wide open. And there was another murder of a woman who happened to be a DHS employee by the name of Lauren Bolus. And actually, she was just one of 3 people who were attacked by this individual who was an immigrant and actually became a naturalized citizen. And let's throw this up here on the screen. This guy was a naturalized citizen. His name is Ola Alukatan Adon Abel. And he was actually naturalized in 2022. So he was an American citizen. But he has a long record of convictions for sexual battery, assault on a police officer, obstruction, assault with a deadly weapon, vandalism. And now he is accused of murdering Lauren Bullis and another woman. And I don't know if the homeless man that he shot survived. Why this guy he was a naturalized citizen, okay, fine. With that record, he should have been denaturalized and booted. Period. But he wasn't. And I do not understand it. And so you all know where I stand when it comes to immigration. The shirt I have on today says deport. If you import the third world, you become the third world, which is available on missionreadymen.com, shop 7 armors. But it's baffling to me that we're letting this happen. And I know President Trump has closed the border and our ICE and DHS are doing everything they can, but they can only do so much based on the damage that was done by Biden and his administration. So our hearts go out to the Bullis family. That is another completely preventable tragedy. Completely preventable, because even if they didn't deport him, he should have been locked up. He should have been in prison. Period. End of story. But that brings us to another incident. And this one is just as horrific. It didn't end in the tragedy that it could have, at least not for the victims. I'm sure the family of the perpetrator is probably upset, sorry for their loss, I guess, but this was another preventable tragedy. So let's take a look at this real quick, and then we'll get into it.
At 9:20, the first officers arrive on call to investigate the nature of this incident. They encountered a female outside the Walmart at this location. She was holding a knife to a 3-year-old child that was in a shopping cart. The officers gave the suspect commands. At what time there is video that shows the suspect swiping the knife at the child, cutting him across the face. Officers at that time, at least one officer fired their weapon, and the suspect is deceased at this scene. When she was approached by the suspect produced a large knife inside the store and took possession of the child, essentially kidnapping the child, gave commands to the caretaker of the child to walk in front of the shopping cart, and the suspect followed with the child, with a knife to the child, followed the caretaker out of the store. They proceeded down the driveway here, and there was some verbal back and forth, it appears, between the caretaker and the suspect for several minutes until officers arrived, and then that's when the officers arrived and the shots were fired. It does appear the child's going to survive at this point, like I said, being treated at the hospital.
So this woman, turns out, has been in and out of mental institutions. She was deemed unfit, but she was supposed to be supervised on a yearly basis for some ridiculous reason. And this happened. And when on this particular post, I said that it is way past time to bring asylums back. This is somebody who obviously should have been in an asylum. She should have not been on the street. Make asylums great again. Another completely preventable tragedy. She would be alive, her family wouldn't be mourning, the child wouldn't have a scar on his face. That whole thing could have been avoided. This is not something that's new, unfortunately. As I was going through all of the crimes and the tragedies and everything that's happening, I came across someone by the name of Herbert Marcuse, who wrote this book called Liberating Tolerance. And what he's suggesting is that we should withdraw tolerance from ideas that, what he, in his terms, sustain oppression, like traditional common sense things, or as some of the commentaries I read, right-wing traditionalist views or whatever. And at the same time, society should, according to this guy Marcuse, extend tolerance to movements that promote quote unquote liberation and social change. That sounds awfully familiar, does it not? Kind of like what's going on right now. He's basically saying that tolerating everything strengthens oppression, strengthens the powerful. And liberation requires not tolerating certain things like tradition, like law and order. And so that's why you have all of these. And this guy, Herbert Marcuse, he was from the Frankfurt School. So he's a huge Marxist, leftist, communist, take your pick. And so anything that dismantles conservatism is what they are for. And that's what we're seeing unfold. We have been seeing unfold before our eyes for a long time. And that's why we have these criminals roaming the streets. Anyway, I wanted to talk about that. I mean, I could spend an entire segment, an entire show on those two things, but now it's time to get to what I actually had prepared. And you saw the thumbnail, the end, which is they missed this. The United States has just positioned itself to control the flow of global energy and global trade at the same time. That is a dominant position to be in. We right now control the skies over one of, if not the busiest trade artery in the world. And we are physically blockading the world's premier, most important oil choke point. That's where we're at. That's happened in the past 48, 72 hours. On April 13th, the United States and Indonesia announced a major defense pact that gives the United States military blanket flyover authorization across Indonesian airspace directly above the Strait of Malacca. Now, some people probably haven't heard of the Strait of Malacca, but it is, as I said, one of the busiest trade routes in the world. And while we have that blanket flyover, we now also have our United States Navy blockading the Strait of Hormuz, which is world's biggest oil choke point, as I said. These two things are not separate. They are part of the same coordinated gambit, a strategic masterstroke, as far as I'm concerned. And you'll hear the left say, he has no plan. He's just fumbling through this. He's losing. Really? Do you really think that controlling the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Malacca is just happenstance? You really think they didn't have this planned out? You forget, President Trump, he was out of office for 4 years. He has been planning this probably that entire time. No plan, come on. And here's the thing, they've known about the Strait of Malacca and the dilemma this could put them in for over 20 years. Former President Hu Jintao identified the Strait of Malacca as a huge vulnerability back in the early 2000s. 80% of China's oil and most of its trade goes through the Strait of Malacca. China buys over 1 million barrels of oil per day, crude oil from Iran, which is 90% of Iran's oil exports. Couple that with the fact that the Strait of Malacca is the busiest shipping lane on Earth and handles twice the trade that the Strait of Hormuz does. The United States has always had the ability, whether we had the will or not, we've always had the ability to turn off the Strait of Hormuz. We've always had that ability. And now blanket flyover rights over the Strait of Malacca means that our Navy, our Air Force can monitor, track, and surge to Malacca anytime we want. Anytime we want, without asking permission. We have that, we have blanket authority. When you combine that with the physical blockade that we have right now in the Strait of Hormuz, Trump and the United States now decide who gets oil and whose trade gets slowed down to a crawl. This is the dominant position that the United States should always be in. Always. People say that President Trump and people who support him are not America first. This is 100% without a doubt America first. Without a doubt. This is energy dominance. We don't depend on oil coming from the Strait of Hormuz. We can protect our own supplies. And now we can influence global prices. I mean, last count I saw, there was 160 something empty tankers headed towards the United States to fill up. We have the ability right now to influence the global economy like we've never been able to do before. And we can choke rival supply lines on a whim if we so choose. The Strait of Malacca, 40% of the world trade flows through that strait. And Hormuz carries 20% of global crude. The United States now has basically a kill switch for both of those. If that's not America first, I don't know what is. But it gets better, because I saw this from the Kobayashi letter, and I'm going to throw this up on the screen real quick. The United States exported over 5 million barrels of oil per day last week, which was a record high. In aggregate, though, according to the Kobayashi letter, the United States exported a record 12.7 million barrels of crude oil and refined products per day. And it's going to likely lead to in excess of 13 million barrels per day in the very near future. Dominance, energy dominance. This is what American leadership has always done, and what it should always do. Secure all of the shipping lanes so that the world economy runs on our terms. That's what a global superpower does. And this America First strength keeps the peace. It keeps the peace. It's not weakness dressed up as diplomacy. Two straits that control so much of global trade, and one superpower is in near total control of all of it. Us, the United States. You got Malacca in the air, Hormuz in the water, and the United States is now the gatekeeper for the global economy, as it should be. Oh my goodness. Well, I see a lot of people are in the chat. Thank you all for being here. I just ask that you keep it respectful, and I thank the moderators for being there, holding everything down. I appreciate that. And like I said, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your participation. We're gonna pivot away from the world stage and bring it back domestically. And I wanted to talk about this before, but I didn't get a chance. And some of the things we're going to talk about today are probably going to push some other subjects off until the next time we're together. I really need to get that Saturday show going, don't I? But anyway, California Democrats just put together a special legal shield around immigration service providers that make it easier to silence watchdogs and keep fraud covered up. Even though the underlying acts that they have that they address in this new bill are already illegal. They say it's about safety. But right after Nick Shirley started dropping his videos on the billions of dollars in fraud that is going on, California dropped this bill. Now, one of the things that they talk about in this bill is doxing and recording and all that stuff. But doxing is already illegal. Doxing is already illegal. Threats are already illegal. So why are there special rules now just for this particular industry? They're going to make this stuff illegaler, I guess. Now, this bill is AB 2624, and it expands safe at home address hiding for immigration workers and volunteers, adds fast track content removal demands for images and personal info, which if personal info is exposed, that is, as I said, already illegal. But it jacks up the penalties to $10,000 for a misdemeanor and $50,000 for a felony. I'm not sure what those limits were prior to this. But this bill was introduced by Mia Bonta. And if that name sounds familiar to you, it should, because she's married to the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta. He's the one responsible for rooting out fraud and corruption and fraud, waste, and abuse and all of that. And she's introducing legislation to shield it, to protect it, to keep it from being exposed. Why? Well, I think we know why. And we'll get into that here in a minute. Now, this bill has been dubbed the Stop Nick Shirley Act because he has been instrumental in exposing daycare fraud and hospice fraud and other taxpayer-funded programs that are dealing with a bunch of fraud. And like I said, he has been instrumental in doing this. And the only reason I can think of that anyone would want to stop this is because they are benefiting. Let's take a look at Nick Shirley here.
Yeah, they're trying to make it so citizen journalists or just average Americans who are going about seeing what's happening inside their community, they're trying to scare them from talking about potential fraud taking place inside of these communities. And think about it. They're literally willing to impose a $10,000 fine or imprisonment if you go and seek to find out the truth about a location that could potentially be fraudulent inside your own neighborhood.
Nick, let's just kind of play out that hypothetical. So whether you were in Minnesota, you also went to California, you would go up to the Quality Leering Center, a clearly fake daycare in Minnesota. There's your shirt. Yes, always on. And you would attempt to see if there's any children inside, right? And somebody comes out and talks to you. And now that person who's there possibly committing fraud could file a complaint in California that Nick Shirley is harassing me online, right? That's how it would work in effect. And then you would either see a year in jail or a $10,000 fine?
Correct. That's what it sounds like. And it sucks because inside these states like Minnesota and California, they've been proven to let fraud take place inside these immigrant communities.
Oh my goodness. This new law isn't against doxing. It's doxing with intent to harm is already illegal under Penal Code 653.2. The carve out for these protections is is what's new. Easier civil takedowns, bigger fines, 10,000, 50,000. And the shield for journalists is narrow, and it doesn't cover independent journalists like Nick Shirley. And the funny thing is, right after Nick Shirley did this, exposed the fraud in California, CBS did their expose. And in their story, they claim that they uncovered it. So, and they exposed some of the same, went to the same places that Nick Shirley went. So they would be covered. Any exposure of these people that happens as a result of CBS's story, they're covered. Nick Shirley isn't, if this law goes into effect anyway. And this is not something new that California has done. Whenever public scrutiny of these government entities, agencies, funding, whenever that comes under scrutiny, they pass a bill to limit the visibility of it. Abortion protections were expanded in the same way. Abortion protections, sanctuary state for abortion and gender affirming care. They enshrined abortion as a right in their state constitution. All of this done after the Dobbs decision. This is their MO. This is their MO. This protects billions of dollars in state and federal immigration spending and fraud from exposure, if this were to pass. And it's being fast-tracked. It lowers the bar for demands and lawsuits while keeping the intent language just vague enough to have citizen journalists like Nick Shirley shy away from these types of stories. Nonprofits, clinics, employees, politicians who get the kickbacks are all protected. But the taxpayers who pay for this fraud and the independent journalists who want to expose it, they're the ones who lose in this deal. The journalist exemption only covers traditionalist media, like I said. So CBS, NBC, ABC, BS Now, all of those, anyone who, if they deign to actually do some journalism, they would be protected. Now, what are the chances, do you think? I think we already know the answer, but what are the chances that Bonta and Mussolini, Gavin Newsom, what are the chances you think that this was done in part to shield them, if not in its entirety? And anyone in their orbit who happens to also benefit. Of course they're involved. And of course they're going to benefit from this. This is going to have again, it hasn't passed, but it's on its way, and it probably will. I don't see any Democrats in California not voting for this, honestly. I mean, it's a one-party state. It's going to pass. But it's going to have a chilling effect on recording taxpayer-funded operations in public spaces. And it is very clearly a violation of the First Amendment. It very clearly. And the federal immigration policies that have increased in visibility because of all of this stuff that's going on, it puts pressure on these programs. And this is going to be this is going to be a huge fight, because the government can't just create classes that shield themselves from accountability with public money. But yet that's what they're trying to do. They did exactly that with the Congressional Slush Fund. They did exactly that. That fund that they use to pay off the victims of their crimes, sexual and otherwise. If we have time later, we're going to get into that with Swalwell. But the right to record public officials and operations is key to self-governance. And of course, the left does not like that. So they have to do whatever they can to mitigate that possibility. And that's what this bill is. They already had the tools to stop any of these threats that they claim this new bill is aimed at. They already had the mechanisms in place to do it. It's not about safety. It's about turning off the cameras to avoid exposing their grift. That's it. As long as their grift isn't exposed, as long as the money keeps flowing, that's all they care about. All right, let's get a word in from our sponsor for today's show. And today's show, I want to talk about the SHR Media Shop. And you can head over to shrmedia.com and click on the very first banner, the top banner. You'll see the 250 Reasons to Read Source Documents t-shirt. And that is in honor of our 250th anniversary as a country. And you can also head over there. When you click on that, that'll bring you to the shop, and you can check out that shirt, and you can check out all the shirts for all the guys' great shows on the network. We got the SHR mug, the Edge of Liberty t-shirt, Beer and Bullstein, Mission Ready Man Briefing, BZ, the Conservative Sherpa, and the Berserk Bobcat Saloon, the Reaver of Common Sense. These are all fabulous designs that you need to check out. And of course, the SHR Media logo tee. Be sure and check all of that out today. All right, y'all. I am Big E, and you are watching and listening to the Mission Ready Men Briefing right here on the SHR Media Network. Let's get back to the briefing. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We just talked about the Democrats and how they want to limit exposure of their fraud and grift. And now they just prove that they do not want safer schools. They want control. They are willing to leave kids vulnerable until law-abiding citizens are disarmed. In a committee room in St. Paul, Minnesota, Republicans handed Democrats a bill which included funds for significant funds for school security, mental health teams, threat reporting, all of the things that actually will help protect children in school. And the thing is, when you think about it, the Democrats have never met a dollar they didn't want to spend, ever. When you think of fiscal responsibility, you do not think of Democrats. Yet they will tell you as often as they can that they want to protect children. But then if you want to spend money to do that, well, not so much. So they got handed that bill from the Republicans, and along party lines, they said no. They said no. And immediately after that, they put forth a bill for another assault weapons ban and magazine limits. That gives you two clear messages, or really one message. You can have safety or control. Pick one. And we know what the left is going to pick every single time. So the House, Minnesota House Education Finance Committee took up a bill called HF 3493, which included $52 million for safe schools revenue, security upgrades, tip lines, and even suspensions from kindergarten through third grade for real threats, which in and of itself is sad that there's actually enough of an issue that they had to put that in a bill, threats from kids from kindergarten to third grade. That's sad. And a whole other story. But every Republican voted yes, and every Democrat, as I said, voted no. And let's take a look at that clip. Maybe.
This package will keep kids safer in school. We can pass this package today if we have a Democrat that is willing to side with us.
Because it's split 50-50, and they don't have the vice president, or in this case, the lieutenant governor, to come in and break the tie. It's a 50-50 split.
Ray Rauer.
No.
Sensor Mira.
No.
Vernig.
No.
Members not receiving the necessary 13 votes in favor of the motion does not prevail. House File 3493 as amended is laid over.
So they don't care. They don't care. Now that same day, they basically told you what their priorities are, because HF 3433 is an assault weapons ban, and then HF 3402, a high capacity, standard capacity, as far as I'm concerned, magazine ban. And of course, Republicans blocked those bills. But that's where you see where their priorities lie. They don't care about your kid's safety. Couldn't care less. I say it all the time. They couldn't care less. Now, they do have another school safety bill, the Democrats do, that they're gonna propose, I believe today, HF 4893. But it's all about counselors and and stuff like that, but has absolutely no physical security measures whatsoever. None. Because they don't care. They just want to talk about your feelings. This is not a disagreement on details. This is not a policy disagreement, so to speak. It is, but not in the way that you would normally think, because this is telling you everything you need to know. They rejected every practical step that could be taken that doesn't infringe on your Second Amendment rights. Rejected every single one of them. And then introduced bills to do exactly that. But this is something that you see all the time. After the Annunciation school shooting in Minneapolis, they wanted to take the guns. You see it in after every tragedy like this. It's the gun. You see all over social media. It's the guns. Meanwhile, none of the proposed bills that they ever put forward would have prevented any of these tragedies. The guns that are used are obtained illegally most of the time. Some of the measures in the bill included secure doors, secure entryways, armed resource officers, mental health screening. And then the Dems always say, nope, we got to take the guns first. We take the guns and then we can talk about these other things, which of course they will never do. Their incentive is simply to pass gun control while emotions are running high, which admittedly happens whenever one of these tragedies happens. And they try to lock in the narrative from their perspective that they are the only ones who care about children. But the problem is real solutions, real security fixes don't expand their power, which is all they care about. But if they're able to create new felons out of law-abiding gun owners, well, then all the better for them. The real solutions don't expand power, but expand their power. But disarming citizens and making them felons overnight does. It shifts the response, and I talked about this at the top of the show. It shifts responsibility from the criminals committing the crimes to the Constitution and lets them claim victory without ever fixing the problem. Because they don't want to fix the problem. The problem benefits them. And next time there's a tragedy like this, they'll say, see, it's the guns. Like I said, you see it all the time on social media. It's the guns. There was just a mass shooting. I think 2 mass shootings in Turkey where guns are heavily regulated. What happened? I thought it was the guns. Your kids, they're in these buildings without the security measures, without the threat hotlines, without any of the measures that the teachers and the administrators ask for. that the parents ask for. But legal gun owners, they face new felonies for tools that they've owned for decades, tools that were legal when they purchased them and remain legal up until 5 minutes ago. It's not safety, it's disarmament. That's what they want. And that's what that's their goal. The Second Amendment is not a suggestion. The language in the Second Amendment is not ambiguous in any way, in any conceivable way. The Second Amendment is the line in the sand that keeps men free. The way to keep children safe, the way to keep society safe, is to harden targets and punish evil. You don't punish the innocent for the sins of the guilty. But that is the left's MO. And you can expand that across any number of issues, like abortion. Faith and reason, really, say the same thing. Say the same thing. Protect the vulnerable, protect the innocent, restrain the wicked, and punish the guilty. But the left seems to be, and people who vote for the left seem to be perfectly willing to trade liberty for a very, very false sense of security. So when they tell you that, getting back to Minnesota, when they tell you that this was about school safety, this was about the safety of your children, remember that vote. Remember that vote. They had the chance. They had the chance and they blew it. They chose to impose control against you instead. They chose control rather than safety of your children. It's amazing how it's not even amazing, it's mystifying how they can justify some of these votes, how they justify some of these laws. And so many people, I don't even know if it's so many people buy it. I think that too many people don't turn out to vote against it. That's the problem. That's the real problem. And that's something that's got to change. All right, y'all. Yeah, I think we're going to have time to get through all of this. Let's see. Do I want to do? No, because I put this topic off for a couple of shows now, and I really want to get to it because we'll try to speed run through it though, because it's old, but it's still important. The socialist mayor, the Islamo-socialist mayor, Islamo-communist mayor of New York just issued an emergency, not just, it's been, like I said, about a week now, an emergency order and turned America's 250th birthday celebration into a TV special rather than the celebration that it should be in person. So, in the meantime, protests they're perfectly fine. with protests in that same area at that same time. But celebrating the 250th anniversary of the birth of this nation, that is a bridge too far. He just signed the executive order that blocked that celebration. They were going to have a ball drop in Times Square, and the ball drop is still going to happen, but you have to buy a ticket. And I'm not sure how much the tickets are, but there's a limited number of them. And then it's going to be on TV. What? And that may sound strange to you, but when you consider the guy who actually signed the order, then it becomes crystal clear why he did it. And I told you who it was. It was the Islamo-communist mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, Ugandan-born Islamo-socialist, Islamo-communist, who flaunts his Muslim, I don't even want to call it faith, but he flaunts his Islamic tendencies proudly. And he has built his career, short enough that it is, around questioning America's place in the world and palling around with people who want to destroy it. So no large event permits will be issued from June 11th until July 19th. And of course, the ball drop takes place at midnight on July 3rd in Times Square. So for all intents and purposes, it was canceled. Who's going to buy that ticket? And of course, his excuse is that because the World Cup lands in that same time, that police protection is going to be already thin, and the city can't afford to spread its police force even thinner to support the celebration. I think if you ask any real Americans, they'll say protect the 250th celebration and let FIFA figure out its own security. You can, I mean, it happens all the time. You can get officers from surrounding jurisdictions, the sheriffs. You can figure it out. You can do two things at the same time. But he chose this route because he's an Islamo-communist. He doesn't see America as legitimate. He doesn't see it as worthy of celebration. This had nothing to do with budgets or security. He saw an opportunity to basically stick it to the United States. And you cannot convince me otherwise. I do not see a logical, rational explanation to explain it other than he hates America and he doesn't think that the 250th anniversary of the birth of this nation is worth celebrating. And so he's not going to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to cancel a ball drop, but he couldn't get it done. Wouldn't surprise me one bit. He doesn't think America is legitimate. None of his cohorts in the DSA, on the left in general, think that the United States is a legitimate nation. stolen land, whatever. When your politics frame the country as the root of all of the world's problems, skipping a milestone like this is nothing. And this is a huge milestone. This is something that is a once in a lifetime deal for a lot of people. Now, there are some Gen Alphas who will probably remember this and still be alive at the 300th. I was alive during the 200th anniversary, but I was 5 or 6 years old. I don't really remember it. So for a lot of people, this is a once in a lifetime deal, and he's taking that away because he hates America. And with this precedent set, what other celebrations, what other milestones, what other events is he just going to say, you know what? I don't like it. I'm not going to allow, I'm going to deny that permit. And how many across the country are going to do the same thing? It's not about the safety of the venue. It's not about the budget. It's not about any of that. It is about the priorities and his priorities as an Islamo-communist. This is the fact that New York actually elected this guy is a tragedy, an absolute tragedy. He is taking away the ability of so many to celebrate the birth of this great nation. Because he doesn't want us to remember who we really are. President Trump on the world stage is doing everything he can to make us remember, and he's doing a great job of it. But Mamdani in New York is doing everything he can to do the exact opposite. This is bigger than him. This is bigger than his imported worldview that treats patriotism as patriotism in this country as illegitimate. He is hopefully a passing fad. I'm not sure, because I heard a story, I didn't get a chance to dig into it, but I heard a story that there are close to 20 jurisdictions in this country that are, for all intents and purposes, running under Sharia law. Like I said, I heard that. I didn't get a chance to dig into it before the show, so that could be off. But based on what you see in places like Texas and Florida and Chicago and Michigan, it's not completely outside the realm of possibility. This is Mamdani is doing his level best to ruin New York City. And if we let him, that ideology, that effort is going to be exported across the country. if we let it happen. Now I'm going to do what I can because I see it starting here in Arkansas. I'm going to do what I can to make sure that doesn't happen here. It's up to y'all to do the same thing in New York and everywhere else. He's allowing protests of the country, but he's not allowing celebrations of the country. Unbelievable and completely believable at the same time. All right, y'all. I want to talk about this too. This is when I first saw this, I was a bit taken aback. And I know a lot of people were. There were a lot of there was a lot of outrage, a whole firestorm of people saying it was blasphemous. And I'm talking about Trump's the picture he posted to his Truth Social that people say depicted him as Jesus. I don't believe that he meant it in a way that was blasphemous. I don't believe he meant to mock God in any way. I believe that he, in his limited capacity, in his limited capacity and understanding, believes he's a Christian. I don't believe he's been discipled in Christianity in any real way. And so a lot of the things that he says and does are off. I freely admit that. But I don't think it comes from any place of maliciousness the way it does with people on the left. And I think that when we're going to get into this here in a second, but when you look at the circumstances around the whole thing, I think this was another example of President Trump trolling. It went a little too far, and I'm glad he took the picture down, but that's my take on it. Now, he posted this picture, and we're going to put it up on the screen. He posted this picture. There we go. He posted this picture, and of course, a lot of people had a knee-jerk reaction saying he was portraying himself as Jesus or God, and saying he was blaspheming the name of God. Like I said, I don't think that that's what he was doing. I think this was in poor taste. He shouldn't have done it. I'm glad he took it down. And he didn't create this. This was created by an artist. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And it was done a couple of months ago and posted a couple of months ago, by the way. But because President Trump amplified it on his accounts, it got the firestorm that it got. And everyone, a bunch of Christians and Catholics and even leftists were talking about how it was blasphemous and all this stuff. President Trump has managed to get the left to defend terrorism, to defend Iran, to defend their right to have nuclear weapons, and now, much to their chagrin, defend Jesus. And they are too stupid to realize that they are getting played. They are getting played. Now, like I said, he took it down, and he had an explanation that, well, I'm going to play for you his explanation, and then I'm going to tell you what I think is really going on. Let's see. Yeah, here we go.
Mr. President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and it had to do with Red Cross.
Okay. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes he thought it was a doctor or have anything to do with the Red Cross. I don't believe it. I don't know why he didn't just say what it really. Well, we'll let him continue, and then I'll talk about it.
Cross is a Red Cross worker there, which we support, and only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, "How did they come up with that?" It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
He's making the country better. I will give him that. For somebody as media savvy as him, I think that was a pretty weak sauce explanation, because what I think is really going on, he posted this picture probably 24 hours after he got into a little back and forth with the Pope. And the Pope, I'm not going to get into a lot of the stuff that he's been saying on this show. I don't have time to get into it. He's turned out to be who we all thought he was going to be, unfortunately, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But this is what I think happened. This is what I think is going on. President Trump, I think, used it to, because like I said, this picture has been out there for months now. And I think he used it as an excuse to get a little dig in on the Pope. Because this is a picture, I know this isn't the current Pope, but there are a ton of pictures of a lot of them in this red robe, with red and white robe. And I think that's what he was doing. I could be wrong. But this was my take on it. And the really ridiculous aspect of this, one of the more ridiculous aspects of this, is the fake outrage that is coming from the left when it comes to this. But they had nothing to say, absolutely nothing to say, when some of this took place. This is a Bunker Hill Community College artist depicts Obama with the crown of thorns. Newsweek had a picture of him saying it was the second coming. He was the second coming. Another Newsweek cover says God of all things. Another one with him with a rainbow colored halo. There was absolutely no outrage from anyone. They referred to him as the Messiah, I think in one of these. Yeah. This one right here, Obama 08, Messiah. All of these. This one right here is a picture of him depicted as Jesus. I don't remember hearing even from Christian conservatives about this, because we don't care. I mean, it's par for the course from the left, but there was absolutely zero outrage on any of this. All hail the God King is what this one says. Where was the outrage? And of course, there was none. Absolutely none. No one batted an eye when he's depicted with halos and crowns of thorns and crosses and robes. Nothing. So that's why I really don't care. Was it in poor taste? Yes. Just like these ones of Obama were in poor taste. And I would go so far as to say that those were actually blasphemous, because those are the ones where they're actually referring to him as Messiah, as God. And I don't get that from this picture that Trump posted and then took down. You can find all of these pictures all over the place. The real story about this is the selective outrage that we're seeing from these people. And I think it was President Trump, or it may have been another official, who said that the Pope didn't have the right to say some of the things that he said. He does. But then the president has the right to fire right back at him. Obama has been depicted, he has been called the second coming. He's been called the chosen one. And like I said, nobody said boo. I think another aspect of this, besides, like I said, the feud that he's been in with the Pope, and we probably will get into some of that in the next time we're together, because it's actually heating up pretty well between President Trump, the Pope, Giorgia Meloni, Tom Homan. So that's probably something we will address. But nobody thinks that President Trump is, at least nobody with a couple of functioning neurons believes that President Trump was saying that he was Jesus Christ or holy in any way. This was a poorly executed dig at somebody that President Trump doesn't like. That's my take on it. And I really, aside from that, I really don't care much about it. Now, I admit, when I first saw it, I was like, I was a little irritated, because my first thought obviously was that it was blasphemous. But then as I thought about it and dug into it, I don't care. And nobody should. Nobody who's actually has a rational thought process around it should care. Other than to say that, yeah, it was in poor taste, but let's move on. He took it down, let's move on. But it was not, in my opinion, not blasphemy. the hypocrisy of the left on this is off the charts. It was a misstep that he owned. It's time to move on. We have much bigger problems to deal with than a poorly timed, poorly executed, in poor taste picture. Now, if you can prove to me that it was somehow blasphemous, I'll listen. But I'm not feeding into that. All right, y'all. I think we are just about done. Like I said, I did want to get into Swalwell, but we really don't have time for that at this point. I did want to see if we could talk about Scott Jennings, but I don't have time to get into that either. Because he just crushed David Hogg on CNN, and I really want to spend a little more time on it than what we have on that too. So I guess we will go ahead and get you all out of here. We've talked about the pattern for a long time. It's really not complicated. They tell you one thing, they show you one thing, they do something else, they show something else on the other side. They will call it safety, but it's really control. They will call it fairness, but it is applied in vastly uneven ways. They call it leadership, but then they avoid all accountability. And all of the distractions keep you moving in different directions rather than seeing what the true picture is. The real moves, the ones that actually shape the world, are happening where people aren't looking. And that's what they want you to think. And in some cases, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like in the case of the Strait of Malacca, we were distracted and he was pulling off a masterstroke. But in a lot of other cases, it's not so great. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. We need to keep our eyes on, keep our eyes peeled for, because it's happening. And once you see it, once you recognize the pattern, you won't be able to unsee it. And hopefully that's what we're opening your eyes to here on this show. All right, y'all, that is it for today's briefing. Be sure to like this episode, subscribe to the channel, check out the great lineup that we have here on the SHR Media Network. We have my good friend Sackhead Sean with The Edge of Liberty every Monday and Wednesday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. We have Jersey Joe, the Reaver of Common Sense, every Monday and Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern. I'm sorry, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And we have BZ in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. And the new guy, Beer and Bullstein with Lyle Armstrong every Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Please be sure to like and subscribe to and share all of these great shows, and continue to pray that we get a big push. The algorithm, the big tech tyrants are choking us out. But we want to reach as many people as we possibly can. So please help us out. Like, subscribe, share, comment, and let's get the word out. And with that, I will tell you that we are not just here to to run our mouths for an hour or 90 minutes. We are here to equip Christian men to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ and carry the banner of faith, freedom, and hope into the next generation. So if anything that we said here today matters to you, please take a second, as I said, to like and subscribe. Don't just watch, but share it. Bring another guy into the fight. And if you want to wear what you stand for, like this assimilate or get out t-shirt, if you import the third world, you become the third world, or turd world, as BZ has said. Head over to missionreadymen.com and click Shop 7 Armors and check out all of the great designs we have there about bold faith, true grit, and unapologetic patriotism. And you can also, while you're there, hit the SHR Media Shop and check out all of the t-shirts that we have there as well. And remember, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, but the Lord is right there with you. So keep your prayers going up and your head on a swivel. God bless.